Hi, good morning, and welcome to another episode of The Hunt. I should say good afternoon. Happy Thursday. Thank you for tuning in. For those who are joining us for the first time, this is our weekly show dedicated towards helping hiring managers and candidates navigate the ever-changing world of recruiting. We have some cool new additions. That intro music, we spared no expense, as well as this little banner. It's on this side, I guess, right here. Getting used to that whole functionality. Thanks to Amanda from our office for putting that stuff together. But welcome, everybody. And again, this show is all about helping people navigate through either getting a job or finding the right talent. We touch on different topics each week, and it's meant to be an interactive show. So we look to you to throw comments in throughout the show. We'd love to hear where you're coming from, where you're watching from, but more importantly, the situations you're facing throughout the recruiting landscape. If you're looking for a job, if you're looking to hire people and having trouble, bring those questions in. The more interactive we can make this show, the more value it could be. And hopefully everyone takes a lot of good insight from the episodes thus far. But for those just tuning in, if you haven't watched before, I'm Kevin Roth. I'm a director of recruiting at Advice Personnel, where I've been for the past 6.5, almost 7 years. And we're a full service agency serving the New York market. So today we're going to touch on a topic that a lot of hiring managers battle with. And it's a real sensitive subject in a lot of ways, and I wanted to make sure we get it out there because it's happened a few times recently, and I think we want to get people educated on how to approach this situation when it happens. So this episode is going to cater directly towards a lot of the hiring managers out there, and we got a lot of people from New York City chiming in. So I'm here in Brooklyn, and hopefully we can help some people in our local area approach this subject. So picture this scenario: you're hiring for your team. It's a key hire. And you go through the whole process, right? It's been a month, you recruit, you interview, you meet a bunch of different people, you finally narrow down the list, you get it down to like 2 people that you really love. And as the last step in the process, your boss just has to kind of say hello and meet them just to make sure that they've had a chance to give their blessing. They go into the boss and the boss says, I really didn't love them. I think we could do a little better. Those of you who are out there having PTSD right now because it's happened to you, this is what this episode is all about, is how to approach that situation, okay? And how to fight for a candidate that you seem to love, but that your boss just is a little bit hesitant on for whatever reason. And as frustrating as this can be and as annoying as it can be, this has the potential to be an absolutely influential, critical juncture in your career and your transition into a true leadership capacity. And you really need to jump on it when it happens and capitalize on it, but you want to do it in as safe and secure a way as possible. Listen, we all sit there, our boss says they don't love this person and we really feel good about them. Automatically we jump to the negatives, right? We hire this person against their will. They're going to have a magnifying glass on them. If they don't work out, it's our neck on the line. But there's so many more positives to think about. And that's what I'm going to take you through today. I mean, I really compared a lot to if you had a parent who had a little more influence than you wanted in who you're dating, right? You dated a bunch of people. You finally find that one that you really liked. You bring him home to mom and dad, and they have some hesitations. Well, listen, ultimately, who you end up dating and who you end up being with throughout your life we'll have some trickle-down effects or trickle-up effects to your parents, right? It impacts them, what their children are doing, their children's happiness. If the person they married is right for them, that's going to make its way to the parents when you're venting and calling them at night and upset or whatever. But ultimately, you're the one that's investing yourself into that relationship. You're the one who is putting everything you have to see that thing succeed. So really, it's on you to make that call. And you always want everybody's blessing. You want everybody to be happy, but it's ultimately on you to determine how that situation plays out. Or I apologize to the people that are in arranged marriages or don't have that level of influence. But as an analogy, I hope you can appreciate the relatability to what we're talking about when you have a boss who is involved in the process, but you're the hiring manager. All right, so without further ado, I want to break that down. And as I mentioned, chime in with questions throughout the show. If you're facing this, you've met a candidate you love, your boss is kind of nixing them, or certain people on the team are nixing them, but you have a good gut instinct, bring your questions in and I'll tell you how to approach these different situations, leveraging my experience in 6+ years in recruiting and really focused on these exact types of situations. So the first thing you got to figure out is know your role, okay? And what does that mean? Really think about where you sit within the organization chart And what's the level of ownership that you have in relation to this new hire versus your boss? Some people are designated as the hiring manager, but in reality, these people are all going to be heavily involved with the boss above you. He just wanted to give you some responsibility. In that case, they might have a right to say, I don't really feel right about this person. Let's keep looking. But if you're really thinking about this, and this is your team, and you're in a position where most of this role is rolling up to you, your boss might have some indirect kind of exposure, but you're the one training, developing, managing, leading this person, and that responsibility is going to fall on you, then you have a little bit more of an impetus to really get your point across and make sure you get the right person that you believe in. So think about that first. Know your role and how much involvement you have and how much ownership you're going to have of this particular individual versus how much involvement your boss is going to have. That's number one. Secondly, is this your first hire where you kind of first go around, you might be missing certain things, you might not know how some of these things play out, you might be a little naive to it, or have you built teams before? Because if you've built teams before, that's another reason to trust your gut a little bit more and feel comfortable preparing your argument in a greater way. Everything we talk about through this process is going to be about building your argument for the end, which we'll get to. So as I mentioned, number one, where do you sit within the org chart? How much ownership is going to fall on you for this position? Number two, is this your first hire or have you built teams before? And number three, what was the mission behind bringing you on board? Think back to when you were hired. Was it because they needed more leadership? Was it because your boss needed to get some of these things off their plate? Was it because they needed to build a team and needed someone who could lead that group? Because if that's the case and those are the things that they brought you on for, then you need to be prepared to enforce that and almost share with them why they brought you on and that this is what you do and this is why you're here. If you were brought on because your boss just needed an extra line of kind of separation or just needed to pass some work off and you're not necessarily being brought on to be that end leader, then you might take a little different approach. But those three things come first. First, evaluate your role and really understand, where do you sit within the org chart? Is this your first hire? Have you been around this road before? And what was the original mission behind bringing you on board? And does that equate to someone that should be a strong leader? Okay? So figure that out, and then you move on to the next step, which is, what's the problem? Okay? What is the underlying issue that your boss found? And there is a major, major, major distinction between your boss coming out of that meeting saying, I don't know, I think, it just didn't have that X factor, it didn't blow me away, versus they really dropped the ball on these questions, they mixed up a few things, there were some really key things they didn't really get, and it just wasn't there. Well, on the latter side of that, you probably have a pretty valid argument that there's some issues there. But if it's more of a subjective kind of view, you can't really put your finger on it, I just didn't sense the engagement or enthusiasm, or the questions weren't fantastic, those are things that you should be very prepared to work through. So understand the nature of the problem to figure that out first. Then once you understand the problem, did anyone else have these concerns? You went through the whole process, right? It's usually the last step they meet the higher up who might nix them. Reflect on the feedback you had from the team throughout. Did anybody else catch this? Because if they did, and this is the second or third time this theme's coming up, then maybe you're onto something, and maybe you should thank them for catching something you might not have. But if not, this is the first time this is coming up, everyone else has thought glowingly about these candidates, then, again, you're preparing your argument. You have a little more ammunition to challenge. So, one, think about, what is the issue? Is it a major, major thing that's tangible, or is it more of a subjective view? Two, did anyone else have these same concerns? And three, more importantly, how does that concern fit in to expectations for this particular type of role? So for instance, if you're hiring a junior entry-level person or a 1-2 year hire, and the boss's concern is, we really need someone who's aggressive, who's got, who's tough, who's fiery, and who really kind of can fit in a tough environment, because I just don't want, we're a tougher place, we need someone that has that. But you're also hiring a 1-2 year person in a junior role that is going to need to listen, you're going to want to train, you're going to want to mold. So sometimes those objections or those concerns that a boss might be finding don't necessarily equate to the qualities that you need. If I'm hiring a junior person, I want moldability, I want coachability, I want someone who listens, who can obviously fit in well with our culture, but who I can really adapt to our environment. I don't want an outspoken person, opinionated, who's very tough and fiery at 1 to 2 years. So think about the nature of the objection and how it also relates to the type of role that you're filling, the level of the role that you're filling, and the qualities you want out of that person. And that ties right back into the first two things I mentioned of if anyone else had these same concerns and if it's a major red flag. Lastly, based on that concern, even if it is something tangible, what's your ability as a manager to train that, right? If you're a leader and you find someone who has 9 out of 10 qualities or 8 out of 10 qualities that hit the mark and they're missing 1 or 2 pieces, I would think that a great leader, depending on the nature of the missing piece, right? A great leader should be confident and comfortable that they can mold somebody and fill in the gaps. That's what a manager brings. Manager's not just to facilitate and make sure you're getting your work done, but a manager should be someone that brings out the best and that gives somebody something that they didn't have before they joined that company. And if you're really confident in yourself as a leader, then you should be prepared to step up and put your foot down when an objection comes up that you can address. So just to recap, number 1, know your role. Number 2, understand the problem that's being addressed when your boss is kind of nixing someone that you really feel good about. Okay, and again, we'll get to questions at the end, so throw your questions in here. If you've ever been through this situation where you found your dream candidate, you love this person, and at the very last step, your boss or higher up is throwing a little curveball and they're not in love. And if you're really unsure about how to make that argument, make that case, throw your questions in here. All right, so the last piece is trust the process. Okay. Think about everything you went through to get to this point. All right, if it was a one-step process, you had a 30-minute call, goes to your boss spends 30 minutes with them, and then they pick up on some things, then maybe they picked up on something you didn't because you really didn't spend that much time. But if this person goes through 3, 4, 5 different rounds, meets with different members of the team, does a case study, an assessment, everyone likes them, you meet 5, 6 different people sometimes, and then they get to the end and this happens, you need to be prepared to trust their process, okay? You need to reflect back and understand how much you went through to get to this point and how many opportunities there were for you to catch this, and you didn't, none of your team members didn't. So while you respect your boss's opinion, whoever that might be, whether it's an executive team member, an owner, or whoever, you have to be prepared to trust that venture that you went through and all the painstaking efforts that you went through in vetting the candidates, getting them through to use recruiters and have them sourcing. Then they're getting to you and you're vetting them out, getting through this whole thing, and they get to the end and they catch something that's not necessarily the biggest red flag. Then you should be prepared to fight for that, or you're going to find yourself spinning your wheels and going around in motions. Okay, so those 3 things, when you're thinking about how to prepare your argument, know your role, and we talked about key things about that. Where do you sit within the org chart? First hire, or have you built teams before? And what was the mission behind bringing you on board? Was it to be this leadership figure? Number 2, evaluate the concern. Is it something that's subjective and just a little kind of thing here or there, or is it a major red flag that you might have missed? Think about, is anyone else on the team having these same concerns? Is this a pattern or just a one-off observation? And remember, how does that concern actually fit in? Just because it's a concern doesn't mean it's relevant to the position that you're hiring. And lastly, are you the type of leader that can work with that and that can train that and is prepared to step up for that? And lastly, review your process. How many people did you go through? What was your steps? Trust that you went through enough of vetting to get to this end point and be prepared to make your argument. All right, so now we got all this stuff ready to go. You're preparing all these pieces and all these bits of details, and now you're ready to put your foot down. And again, I know it's a scary thing. You're going out there, you're stepping out on a limb. You might be with a new company. It might be your first hire. You might be at a company that really, really frowns upon turnover, which most should, but some more than others, where you feel pressured. If this doesn't work out, it's on you. And it's so much easier to just, all right, boss doesn't like them, I'll keep looking and I'll find the right person. But you got to be prepared to fight for the ones you love. And title of this episode is Fight for Your Right to Hire. I was trying to put some Beastie Boys in at the beginning of the show, but due to copyright infringement, I don't want to get caught up in anything like that. But shout out to the Beastie Boys. And you need to really take this to heart. You got to fight for the ones you love, because in this market, a few points. Number one, and probably most importantly, if your boss brought you in as a leader and as a manager, okay, They're paying you a certain salary. They're bringing you on to be a leader. This is your prime opportunity to show them why they brought you on board and the value that you can add. If you're reporting to the owner and you got brought in as a senior level person to take a lot of the hiring off his plate, and you're still deflecting to him, yeah, it feels good. You're going with his answer. He's comfortable. But subconsciously, they brought you on to take those decisions off their plate. They want the type of person who can step in and say, this is what you brought me on for. I definitely respect your opinion, but unless it's a glaring red flag, we've gone through 5-6 rounds. I feel good about this person. I trust my instincts. I hear what you're saying, but as long as you don't have any like glaring, absolute hard objections, I think this is our person. If that person works out, which it should, because of everything you went through, that amount of autonomy and independence you're going to have going forward is going to be unbelievable. Otherwise, next time you hire, boss is going to be involved again and again, and now you're setting that trend, and it's very tough, second, third, fourth time around that this happens to then break the mold, because they're going to always say, no, listen, you listened to me last time, look how it worked out. Take that step. If you really believe in it and you believe in this person, feel comfortable stepping up and having that conversation. So that's the biggest reason you have to do this, to make your argument. It's going to set you up as a leader in your boss's eyes. It's going to set you up for stronger leadership positions as you continue to evolve and grow. And if that person works out, you're going to be remembered for making that call and making that decision. And that is going to change your trajectory. Like I said, this could be a pivotal junction in your professional trajectory, especially if your vision is stepping into more of a senior leadership role. Secondly, on more of a personal level, in this remote world, I don't know how many hiring managers are out there watching. Are there any hiring managers that have teams under them that are watching the show right now? Because it is not easy managing remote. When you're in the office, it's one thing, but when you're semi-remote or remote, it takes a conscious effort from you to be on top of this person, to communicate more over the phone, to make sure they're on top of things, to have a good rapport, to almost think where each other's, kind of seeing around corners for each other. You really got to be closer with your team remotely than you ever were in person without seeing them. So to hire someone that wasn't your top choice, but to satisfy everyone's wishes when you really had a favorite, it's doing yourself a disservice, it's doing the candidate a disservice, and quite frankly, it's doing the company a disservice, because you're never going to show that person the same amount of love and passion and investment that you might have to someone that was your favorite. So you owe it to yourself and every party involved, every stakeholder involved in this process, to go with the person you feel best about, because that's the person that you're going to feel more vested in. Especially if you know your boss was against them and there's some hurdles there and the eyes are on you, you're going to make sure that person succeeds. So here you are setting a candidate up better because you're going to invest yourself more heavily in the process. You're setting yourself up to be a better leader because you put your foot down and now you're grooming this person to be a superstar. And you're setting the company up for success because now they got a whole team that's working well together, a team that likes each other, that'll probably limit retention. So it's so important, especially in a remote scenario, to push for that first choice. Fight for the ones you love, because you never know how good that next person up is going to be if you got to start the process over, and you can't afford in this market to miss out on someone that you really feel good about, especially in a remote world. So again, remember those two factors. Lastly, when all else fails, you're the one that's managing this person. You're the one training. You're the one developing them. You're the one spending time with them. You're the one that this relies on. Put yourself on the line and speak to your boss. And again, unless there's a glaring red flag that you can really objectively relate to and you're just exhausted from interviewing, if you can objectively say that this is your hire and that you feel best about this person, then you have to fight for it. Or honestly, you probably should be in a capacity that you're in versus a true leader who can really make these kind of hiring decisions. All right. So I know it's scary and I know these are nerve-wracking situations, but hopefully this helps point you in the right direction. When these situations come up, you need to make sure you bring on the person you feel best about. If you're that true hiring manager, it's on you to build your team the right way and fight for the ones you love. Okay. And lastly, for those that are thinking of the downside, I think you've really got to realize the absolute worst case scenario here is you give everything you got, you hire this person, for whatever reason they don't work out, but you gave it everything and really wanted to see this person succeed. And I think you should be able to sleep at night knowing that. And if you're at a company that's going to let you go because a hire didn't work out that was beyond your control and you gave everything you had, then that's not the right type of place anyways. And I think you'll realize that the power of making a hire that you feel good about, with the diligence that you did, with the process that they went through, with the feeling, the gut instinct that you have, the amount of investment that went into it, I think the odds are much more likely that hire is going to work out than it wouldn't. I think the tables are turned if you go with a hire that you're not as excited about because it assuages everybody else's concerns. All right, so with that, I just want to get through a few questions, and then we'll wrap up for today and move forward to next week. But we have a few questions here. So number one, how would you go about talking to your boss about wanting to hire someone for a brand new position, but they don't think they need it? All right, so this is a very similar scenario. Yeah, you really know you need this hire. Your boss doesn't necessarily think you need it. He thinks you can get by without it. So you got to prepare that same argument. What have you heard from your team? Is your team stretched thin? Are things falling short? Is your team working till 5 in the morning and really grinding it out? Are you starting to get the sense you're losing people? Did you have someone come to you and say they're starting to look because they can't manage? Are you getting bogged down with things that are taking you away from where the value they need? Show them that tangible value. We talked in a few episodes. You got to bring quantitative or qualitative value to the asks that you have. And in that situation, if you need a new position, if it's because you're way down, then speak to them about the things you want to get exposure to, the things that could really impact the company that you're not able to because of X, Y, Z. And if it takes hiring another $40,000, $50,000 junior employee, and it's going to free you up to potentially put things into place that'll drive efficiency through the roof, that'll lead to cost savings that are far beyond what that $50,000 would equate to, then bring that in. Add tangible value, bring those situations up, bring the thoughts and concerns from your team, bring the observations that you've had, and bring the real logic behind how this new hire could actually end up saving the company money versus spending money on headcount. And that's the root of every single presentation you want to make when you're pushing for a new hire. Last question for the day is, what if you made a bad hire once and find yourself in the same situation? So we all make mistakes. You gotta really put those things past you. I always use sports analogies in this, and I think the best players that you see, especially in basketball or really any sport, football, they always talk about the most critical pass a quarterback throws is right after he throws an interception for a touchdown. He has to sit there on the sideline, wait till they kick off. He's got to go right back out there. And you always want to see, and the best coaches know their players, and they'll throw them into the same pass play or a similar kind of play to get their confidence right back up. So you got to approach it the same way. If you're in a leadership situation, people make bad hires. There are things you don't see, but you have to learn from it. Understand what made it a bad hire. How could you have vetted it out differently? How could you have screened it differently? And you need to go in with the same fervor. And if the boss brings that up, you made this bad hire, you should be prepared with the argument that, yeah, and as I thought about it, I've grown a lot since then. This is the decision. These are the things we did that time. This is the things I added to the process this time to nix that. I got different opinions this time around. All of us are on board. I feel good about it. And you have to be ready to make that case. As a leader, if you're going to be in a managerial position, you have to be prepared to do that. If you lose confidence in your ability to make good hires and make smart hires, and you're relying on others around you to just make the consensus pick so the pressure's off, then you should be taking a step down career-wise into a lesser role that doesn't involve these decisions. And sorry if that's too harsh, but on a positive note, ultimately at the end of the day, if you take these steps into account and you really take it to heart, you are going to be hiring people that you love, people you enjoy working with, teams that are great. And by nature and by design, if you hire people you love as a leader, that love is going to trickle down to them. They're going to be happier, and the team is going to blossom from there. And you'll be setting yourself up for a ton of success, not only in your team's eyes, but in your bosses, that you were the type of person that let them give you the reins and freed them up to focus on things that they originally wanted to focus on when they hired you. All right. So I hope these conversations are valuable. Again, throughout the week, chime in with comments, throw your comments into the boxes. I'll get back to those throughout the course of the week, and really feel free to reach out to me, message me, but follow advice on LinkedIn, share the posts, comment, and we'll be back with a brand new episode next week. In the meantime, hope everyone enjoys the rest of the week. Hope you enjoyed the episode and the new music and little banner that we got going. Hopefully we'll continue to add some cool things, and have a great weekend. And we'll be back next week with an all new episode. Thanks for tuning in.